Action!
Action! Everybody, action! We're Cold Slither, you'll be joining us soon. A band of vipers playing our tune. With an iron fist and a reptile's hiss, we shall rule.
What is that idiot doing?
We've heard it before. We're not gonna play the game no more. Don't tell us it's right.
They are animals!
Too late to resist, cause Cobra is strong.
Oh my goodness, we're going way over budget!
We're
Barbarians!
Every man on the ship.
No! Cut!
You fool! This is what I want! Keep the film rolling!
Talking Joe is on the air.
Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. Now, today, we will be looking at G.I. Joe Cold Slither, the special released just this week gone, Wednesday, October the 1st, 2025. Synopsis: the greatest band ever returns to rock and rule the world. Discover the true, well, kinda, story of what happened to Cold Slither through the eyes of the band themselves, who were, of course, not the Dreadnoks on an undercover mission. But as Cobra is topping the charts and dominating the world, can G.I. Joe find a way to change the tune? Tim Seeley and Juann Cabal present the most unexpected new comic book of the year. But I will not be talking about this comic just by myself, as always. I'll be joined by my co-host. It's a real slithering Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hi, Mark. Hi, listeners. Hi, viewers. I was trying to think of some pun, like if only I had come up from below my desk with a microphone stand or a mohawk. I don't know. Anyway, what an unusual comic we're talking about today, and we're live.
So yeah, we are live. So hello everybody. Hello Paul. Hello Infinite Entertainment. And so I think we're already educating Infinite Entertainment. Ooh, it's from the cartoon. That makes so much more sense. So
I mean, technically, it's from a couple new action figures. So this is, sort of generated from Hasbro in 2025. But yes, we are looking back to 1985.
Indeed. So we'll get into that very shortly in a minute. Let's just cover a couple of bits of news since we've not spoken about comics for a while, just to flag. If your favourite format is in collections, you're in for a treat because there's a few collections coming out lately, some of which include the Silent Missions collection, which includes all of those, was it 5 in the end? Issues from the top-tier creators taking their own spin on G.I. Joe in a silent format.
Plus, it has issue 21, Silent Interlude, and it's all on newsprint. So if you missed the single issue reprinting of issue 21, Silent Interlude, in the big compendium box set Kickstarter, if you missed the regular comic book store release of the issue 21 reprints on newsprint that came out 6 months ago, my store still has them. It is in this book, but also, interestingly, those 5 new stories from this year, which were printed on regular paper in 2025 for this collection, are on newsprint. So they have a kind of an old-fashioned feel.
Interesting. And also out is the second compendium. So that comes in 2 flavors, a standard and a retailer direct market version, which has got the yearbook cover with a big hero shot of the Sky Striker on the front. So another big fat collection. If you missed out on the Kickstarter, or you just want to collect it in a slightly different way and have to have everything, then here's another way to experience. So that is out again, just gone. October the 1st was the release date for G.I. Joe Compendium 2, collecting the second installment of Classic ARA, plus a little bit of special missions in there, I think, as well.
This softcover is gigantic. It is also all on newsprint. So if you have been concerned about the compendium format, like Invincible Compendium or Walking Dead Compendium or Milestone Compendium, or what's that Lobo one? It's like Lobo Big Fraggin' Compendium 1. This is on newsprint. It is not very heavy at all. And I kind of think that there's an error here on this solicit, because it says that Andy Kubert and Laura Martin did the cover.
I guess this is them.
I guess that is her. I guess that is her signature. Okay, I thought that this was drawn early enough that it was still Brad Anderson.
Okay,
but I'm getting mixed up. Brad Anderson colored Andy Kubert's artwork that was on the boxes for the hardcover Kickstarter compendium set. Anyway, what else is new, Mark?
I was just going to say to Hyde Sir Matthews joined us as well. He's been catching up on Conan comics, which is allowed. You can venture out into other comics. We do permit that, but we'll be getting into spoiler territory once we're past the covers. So up until then, you're safe. If you do want to avoid spoilers, obviously they will be coming up. And then, I thought we would just get into a little bit of Cold Slithering, because it's not just a comic, it's a whole cultural event. And let's get into the detail of some of the background as to what it's all about. So I guess Cold Slither began all the way back in the Sunbow cartoon. Original air date, December 1985, written by Michael Charles Hill, who has since made his way onto the G.I. Joe convention circuit, embracing the fan community. What can you tell us, Tim, about the original Cold Slither?
Well, Michael Charles Hill was a producer at Sunbow. He was in Los Angeles. He was working on G.I. Joe and Transformers and the other shows. And he also wrote a few episodes of G.I. Joe and Transformers, and is having a funny kind of renaissance, because in addition to this story and these versions of these characters from his teleplay, from his script, two original characters that he created for three original characters that he created for a 1986 episode of Transformers have been showing up in Void Rivals.
Huh.
And so this episode is hilarious. The Sunbow cartoon, I think people who have never watched it, or who were sort of leery of it, wary of it in the 80s, I think people who don't know G.I. Joe think that G.I. Joe is sort of like mindless and dumb, and it's just these like overly patriotic characters, and it's really violent. And I don't think they get this sense that it's crafty and clever. And the G.I. Joe cartoon was clever, right? There were little bits of satire in it. The people who wrote for the show were smart and had been working on sort of good and bad shows, or good and bad comics, and knew the difference. And the G.I. Joe cartoon, I've heard this over and over in my interviewing with writers and producers, that they were allowed to push the envelope. And, if you look back now, you might think it just looks like a clunky 80s cartoon with a really, fancy, expensive theme song, main title animation. But if you compare it to cartoons that were on at the same time, there is a big difference. So, in this episode, it's making fun of groupie fandom. It's making fun of music culture. It's poking fun at MTV, and the ending is a little dumb or a little silly. And in terms of the stakes, it's sort of smaller, sort of the take over the world plot that Cobra Commander has. And you can see it right here in this still, Mark, that you have put on screen. G.I. Joe was well animated until it wasn't. And the first 5 episodes in 83, the Mass Device, the next 5 episodes, the Weather Dominator, the next 5 episodes, the Pyramid of Darkness. Those were all like amazing to great. And then all of a sudden they needed to make not like 5 episodes in a year, but 60 episodes in a year.
60, crikey.
Yes, not 6, not 16. I guess because they had 10 already from 83 and 84. I think the number they actually needed for the full season in 85 was 50. But anyway, so like Zartan's arm is not well drawn in this still, and Ripper's head is a little off, and like animation gets clunky and drawings get clunky. But what really shines through in the Sunbow episodes is the writing, the voice acting, the music. And this episode is really unusual because it is about a song, and it is an original song. And I apologize, I don't actually know if Michael Charles Hill wrote the lyrics.
I believe he did.
I'm guessing okay, all right, thank you. And then presumably Robert Walsh did all the music because he was doing the score, the background music for this episode, for the series, right? For the 1985 season and more. And he had done music for TV and film. He'd been in touring musicals. He had played in rock bands. So this was absolutely up his alley. So it is one of my favorite episodes, and I am tickled that it's having this weird renaissance.
In a nutshell, for people who are less familiar with this episode or who haven't seen it in a little while, it is out there on YouTube on the official Hasbro channel, so you can watch it in a kosher way. Essentially, boiling it down, the plot: Cobra have lost all of their money from a G.I. Joe raid. So they don't have enough money to continue. The Cobra troopers are signing up for employment benefit. It's out of control. Cobra Commander steals $1 million, and with that last $1 million, uses that to fund a scheme where he's going to record a music video with the Dreadnoks as this band, and within that video, it's going to have subliminal messages which will make people loyal to Cobra. And he Pied Pipers a whole bunch of kids into a stadium where the Dreadnoks put on a gig. And in that audience, it also includes some G.I. Joes who've been brainwashed by the music. And instead of taking over the world, Cobra decides to try and blackmail the government for, I think, $1 billion. And G.I. Joe have their 3 female leads, Scarlet, Lady J, and CoverGirl, sort of dress up as groupies and sort of infiltrate, beat up the Dreadnoks, smash up the subliminal music, and then have the G.I. Joes come on and play a song at the end instead, because they're all there for a concert. And who else is going to play?
So 2 thoughts. One, in the episode, the song has already been recorded, and the Dreadnoks are a fake band in costume lip syncing to this song for the music video, and then presumably lip syncing at the concert. And I think I sometimes sort of, when I'm remembering this episode, I misremember it as the episode where the Dreadnoks recorded a song, sang a song. And technically in the story, they don't.
But it sounds an awful lot like them singing, doesn't it?
Yes. In terms of having voice actors in the booth to sing this song, I hear those voice actors, and it doesn't really change the story either way. But in terms of sort of being accurate about what's happening, and then the other thing that I want to point out is that it's an awesome song, and as a kid, this is about the singing, this is about the lyrics, this is about the music. But as a kid, I thought this was a fun episode with cool music, and I understood it was an unusual episode because no other episode has an original song. This music was used in a couple other Sunbow productions, or at least one other. The instrumental version of this music shows up in, I think, 1 or 2 episodes of Transformers. I think this is in Autobop, which is the this is an Autobop, which is the episode which kind of similarly the Decepticons have a dance club, and there are subliminal messages in the music, and it's sort of brainwashing people into. It's a little unclear. That episode has a plot hole, but and if you know the Sunbow cartoons really well, you know that in some like later episodes of Transformers, some of the background music from G.I. Joe gets used a few times. But this is a funny episode. This is a weird episode. The ending I find a little embarrassing. As a grown up, I love it and accept it. But I just want to point out that the point of the episode isn't to write a bad song or to make fun of bad songs in my take. I think this is just a cool song. And sometimes I've hummed it over the years, like not when it was sort of back in vogue because of new toys in 2024, 2025. Sometimes I've hummed it while I'm doing the dishes. I also hum like the theme song and jingles from the ads. And for many years, I sort of like occasionally wondered if there was one more verse, because in the episode, you never hear the whole song play from start to finish. It really feels like you hear the intro, the first verse, the chorus, the second verse, the chorus, and then it sort of it's like switched off. And because if it's a 3-minute song, 4-minute song, they're not going to play the whole thing.
And for assembly required 2023,
Iron Grenadiers was the theme last year. Destro. So yeah, 2023.
Yeah, they had their theme as being Cold Slither. And so they had a whole bunch of merch. So we had Cold Slither t-shirts, and they also created a single. So they re-recorded Cold Slither, and they added in some extra verses to pad it out to a bit more of a full song. So that was kind of I guess the first time that we got a proper full song version of Cold Slither.
Yeah, let me just add 2 bits. Michael Charles Hill was a guest that year, and I think by then had one of those companies released some pins, some like lapel pins or cloisonne pins.
Been a little bit after. So Icon Heroes, I think, were the first out of the gates with official licensed merch. So they had these, Cold Slither Dreadnok pins, and I think they also released maybe some art, or this might have just been the box art relating to the pins that's on the screen.
I think so. I think someone had made unofficial fan pins, and Michael Charles Hill had those at his table, I think, that year. Folks, if you think you're looking at a vinyl record that is not a vinyl record, that's the sort of backing that these 4 pins come on, and the packaging looks like you're pulling a record out of a sleeve, as if Cold Slither had released, an album. And the other thing to say about Assembly Required 23 is that all of the signage around the convention was Dreadnok Cold Slither themed visually. And if you want to see some pictures, go to my blog, go to A Real American Book, and in the search field, type Assembly Required. Yes, Mark is holding up his badge from that weekend. And the badge features new artwork and logo designs in Dreadnok color schemes from Brian Sauer, co-organizer of that convention and a talented designer.
And another early bit of Cold Slither Renaissance was a variant cover to G.I. Joe issue 212, which featured the band Cold Slither plus Gem as well.
Yeah, that would have been like 10 years ago, right? 212.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe issue 212. And then was it a year or two ago that, okay, here we go. Then now we have official merchandise in the last year.
Yeah, so
what
the
do we
big
have?
one that sort of really made a bit of a stir is the official G.I. Joe classified Cold Slither box set, which was kind of revealed relatively while ago, but it was the big Hasbro push for San Diego Comic-Con this year. So it had the 3 Dreadnoks plus Mr. Z, and all of their instruments, the guitars, the drum kit, and a fancy presentation box as well. So a really nice sort of deluxe set. And there's been a lot of just synergy tying into that they've had an official Cold Slither logo. You can see there on the drum kit, the same logo that's been seen everywhere since, including on the front of this latest comic. And sort of tying into that, in the terms of the timing, Super 7, one of their first Reaction Plus figures, they released a Zartan Cold Slither character as well. So this is one of the new 3 3/4 inch O-ring figures from Reaction Plus. I just got one in the post this week, Tim. Look, it's a bat.
Okay.
With
Mark is holding up a bat with is it dynamite strapped to its chest?
Yes.
Okay, and it's blue, so it's sort of in the animated series color scheme, because Super 7's Reaction and Reaction Plus figures, I guess with the exception of Quinn, are Sunbow G.I. Joe animation
this one is to tie in with the comic book where the bats attacked the pits and sort of came down the elevator shaft, and then those generals who were being given the tour. Sort of were defending. So very, very cool comic. Quite an iconic look to the bats. I'm getting that's a size. So and also
95% of the Reaction and Reaction Plus figures have been animation specific designs and color schemes.
And Cold Slither, and there was also a Cold Slither T-shirt from Super 7 at San Diego this year as well. But the really amazing thing was RPM Records, Reigning Phoenix Music, actually creating a full-on Cold Slither album with the Cold Slither track, but also a number of brand new originated songs fronted by various sort of heavy metal musicians, real-world musicians across their label and sort of their surrounding network. And more than just creating a brand new album with the music, they actually got together and have performed live at San Diego Comic Con. Real life musicians as the Cold Slither band doing a concert, and at that concert as well, also a guest appearance from Gem as well. So that was quite incredible. So at Cold, it was July 24th, 2025, San Diego.
And we are recording this, we are streaming this 1 week before New York Comic Con, October 2025, where there will be another Cold Slither performance by these 4 real life human beings in costume doing that song and some original songs. This is not at the Javits Center. This is not at New York Comic Con. It is at a venue, nearby in New York. So it's one of the sort of associated New York Comic Con events. And we should probably pause to talk for a moment about this, what would you call it, phenomenon, this brand extension, because I feel like, if you think of, so Transformers, every time there's a Transformers sort of licensed figure, right? Blokies, or like bobbleheads, or Funko Pops, or whatever they are, at different scales. If you get an Optimus Prime, they're also going to release that in white and call it Ultra Magnus. They're also going to release it in black and white gray and call it like Deceased Optimus Prime or Fallen Commander Optimus Prime, which refers to how he looks for a moment in the animated movie. You're going to get these variations, which are now very much a part of the, not just sort of the animated series or toy canon, but the broader brand and mythology and product canon. If you think of like Real Ghostbusters, the Real Ghostbusters toy and cartoon, I don't think there's anything comparable to this. If you think of He-Man and Masters of the Universe, I don't think there's anything comparable to this where it's one episode that many years later, Hasbro and its sort of marketing team or marketing partners decide is something that they can push as this sort of niche brand extension. Like, okay, you remember that one episode that everyone likes, but we haven't particularly talked about for 40 years? And it's where the characters are in different costumes and there's a song. Like, why don't we do a bunch of stuff around that? And I know that we have in the reaction figures lines in Classified, we've gotten some variations like, Cobra Commander in his winter outfit from G.I. Joe the movie. That's a small version of this. But this is so specific because it's this other layer of reality, right? The Zartan and the Dreadnoks are pretending to be a band, and whether they're singing or lip syncing, right? And it's only for one episode. And yet now you have real people playing them and we can buy this album or I guess listen to it on Spotify. Yeah. It's very strange and funny.
It's a sort of a brand synergy event. And, counting it on my fingers. Okay, we've got pins, Reaction Plus, T-shirt for Reaction Plus, Classified, vinyl album, live performances, and a comic book. So that's at least, and I'm probably missing something. There's at least sort of 7 kind of brand extensions, all just tying into this Cold Slither event, and it's quite unusual for, I think. I can't think of a very good parallel for G.I. Joe, where there's been such a big explosion across so many different outlets and media, all sort of tying into the same thing. Although it feels like with Super 7 and Classified, there's coincidental or otherwise, there's a little bit of that. We've got Pythona and a big Pythona and a little Pythona, big glob and a little big glob. That kind of thing.
Big glob.
But
again,
one parallel, Shadows of the Empire, which I'm not saying this is as big as that, but that's going big. This is Star Wars in 1996, where nothing much had been going on with the Star Wars brand at that point in time, and they just went across basically every single big punchy media. So they said, let's pretend almost this is a cinematic event and treat it as seriously as that. So they went toys, comic, a big budget video game, soundtrack,
trading cards, soundtrack for a movie that did not exist, trading cards. Shadows of the Empire, speaking of toy companies, Shadows of the Empire was, I believe, originated at Kenner, right? So Kenner had brought back Star Wars just the year before with Power of the Force. The special editions weren't out yet. The prequels were really not out yet and were barely being started to be worked on. And Kenner was looking for a big brand extension, a big, theme to build around the brand. And it sort of reminds me of the Pursuit of Cobra line for G.I. Joe, where Hasbro has these Rise of Cobra tie-in action figures and vehicles. If the movie's a hit, those toys are going to be a hit. But those toys have sort of a limited sales window because they're tied to a movie. You can't release them too soon because of the rules. You'll, spoil things about the movie, or you need them to sort of hit around the same time or just early enough that people are excited. If they're on shelves a year later, it looks like desperate. But also Hasbro is going to have to split a little bit of the profits on those toys with the movie people, because those are movie tie-in toys. And so what does Hasbro do? The line that's going to follow is like an extension of Rise of Cobra without being officially connected to a Paramount Skydance motion picture, right? So it's like something Cobra, and it's some of those characters and designs, but it's sort of in this, as much story as you can fit onto the back of a packaging, right? There were no comics. There was no direct to DVD movie. It's like, well, what sort of happens next? Even though there's no movie. And then, when there's a second movie, we'll do the second movie toys. I guess there are some other sort of variations here. Like with Ninja Turtles, you now have, there'll be toys which are based on the black and white Mirage comic books from the 80s, or the, very specific like 1988 animated series, the Wolf Murakami animated series, or maybe even like the current comic or a specific movie. But again, the fact that this is so much stuff from one episode, and I feel like the pinnacle of this is, of course, this box set of 4 classified figures from Hasbro, and then these 2 concerts. But, I don't know a lot of economics about bands and live musical performances. I know that, the biggest bands like U2 and the Rolling Stones make a lot of money when they tour, and tickets get very expensive, and that makes the news. I sort of wonder what what the charts, the money charts, the numbers are for, was it RPM records? RPM records, for this label, these 4 performers, Hasbro, what are the expectations? What would exceed expectations? And if expectations are met or exceeded, is there another thing that happens? I assume if this sells really well, Skybound would do a second printing, unless Hasbro says, no, this has to be sort of contained to the summer and early fall of 2025. But if this comic book sold really well, if the band performances had crazy buzz, would Skybound say, let's do another comic or let's do a mini series? Would the band have more performances? Where? Would there be a second album? And so part of me is like tickled and delighted, and part of me is confused is too strong, but slightly puzzled. Like, oh, you've done all this for like this tiny sort of bit version of G.I. Joe. It's like you couldn't do a band doing performances for sort of regular G.I. Joe, but well, how about a parade? Or, how about hey, Hasbro, do this much for regular G.I. Joe.
And I think part of it as well is like fan enthusiasm, that the main guy behind this, Mr. Z, the character from the real world, Cold Slither, is a big G.I. Joe fan, and I think that's a big part of him wanting to do this particular project. And apparently it was something that had been on the back burner in his brain for quite a long time, and it just so happened that the synergies kind of lined up where it made a lot more sense to do it. And I imagine, doing big shows like this, it's a lot of logistics and work, and if Hasbro's able to help with some of that organization and bankrolling it to some degree, then it makes it a little bit more feasible.
Or maybe Hasbro doesn't bankroll it. Hasbro doesn't pay Reaction to make Reaction G.I. Joe figures. Reaction pays Hasbro for the privilege of making Reaction G.I. Joe figures. And then when they sell, Hasbro gets, a little cut in addition to the licensing fee. I
get the sense that this is these live events particularly is a bit of an extension of the Hasbro brands.
Okay, so it's a PR event in addition to a license.
Mm-hmm, I think so.
Okay, just to clarify, when you describe Mr. Z, you're talking about the real life human being who is singing as Zartan and who is playing guitar at these 2 performances and on this album. And is that someone high up at RPM Records?
I think he's a musician, one of these musician who's within the circles is known. Okay. And they're not making a secret of who it is. I don't know. I don't know off the top of my head. Can't remember his name. But
wait,
he's done various.
Go full screen on me. It's on the back cover of the Cold Slither comic book. I'll hold it up and you can read it.
Yeah, Gus Rios. There we go. Vocals, guitars, and I believe that he did most of the writing and recording as well. And then he had some, friends and colleagues to join him for the live events. Torch, Ross Sewage, Matt Harvey, and Andy Selway, who and across all of these bands, they also perform in various metal bands. So
okay. Is there yet more context, or are we going to talk about this comic book?
No, let's talk about this comic. The creative team. So this issue is brought to us by Tim Seeley, writer, Juann Cabal, artist, Rex Lokus, colors, Pat Brosseau, lettering, Ben Abernathy, editor. So same editor as the Skybound universe, but not in that not in that Energon universe. We don't have the Energon Universe logo in the corner, and Gillian Crabb publication design. So we can see little thumbnails on the screen at the moment, but let's take a bit of a deeper dive into those images, what we find on the front of these books.
Let's have a look at the covers in the gallery.
Cover A of G.I. Joe Cold Slither. And I just want to point out the indicia. This comic book in all the catalogs is G.I. Joe Cold Slither. The word G.I. Joe does not appear on the covers. On the covers, it's just Cold Slither. It's just the Cold Slither logo, which is cool and exciting and also maybe confusing. Okay, cover A is painted by Steve Beach. Steve Beach is this the artist who's doing some more G.I. Joe covers upcoming, the 1 in 10s?
Yeah, he's doing the 1 in 10s for G.I. Joe, A Real American Hero from, I believe, issue 3 to 1.
Okay. So Steve Beach has done a little bit of work for DC and Dynamite. This is a painted cover which features the band. Mark has a slide up right now of the original painting. So this is not digital. And so we've got the 4 band members, and they are muscular and vital. They're all in like awesome rock and roll, heavy metal poses, guitar straight up, lips pouting, teeth clenched. Zartan, has his chest is sort of poking out of his black leather sleeveless vest as he holds this guitar, and they're on stage, and behind them is this sort of electric and fire light that is both sort of yellow and red, but also a little blue. As a framing element on the top and on the bottom are 4 fangs, as if they are performing, as if the stage is like inside the mouth of a snake. And that's really fun and really cool. The painting goes a little further up and down, and I think more than that sort of standard comic book trim. But the sort of art style here, to me, says like the sort of, these 4 men are sort of lit by sort of white spotlights, but they're also like sweaty or oily, right? Like they're a little shiny. There's like white highlights on their muscles, on their hair, on their teeth. And the rendering here, to me, says like a sort of 80s old school painting style that reminds me of like heavy metal album covers, or a little bit Joe Jusko, but sort of like wetter, more wet than Jusko paints. And I think the idea here is if the characters weren't never drawn perfectly in that episode, which has some clunky animation and keyframing, and if there's no like one really good still from that episode that could sort of be the poster or album cover or publicity photo, like if you could go back in time and pull it out from 85 and put it out now, like this is what it would be. Like this is not like drawn in a manga style. It's not drawn in a post Jim Lee like Image Comics style. This looks like a painting from the 70s or 80s, like the cover of a Meatloaf album, the cover of a I don't know, Judas Priest, I don't know,
someone else,
someone
from
else.
that era. Yeah, paint it with paint it on the side of a tour bus, that kind of thing. And Steve Beach, I think, would fit nicely in that oeuvre of artists who were painting Marvel Masterworks trading cards in the mid 90s.
Yeah,
as you say, the Jusko and the Julie Bell and all of the likes of those artists.
One last thing I want to say, though I think the Cold Slither logo, it's meant to look like an 80s metal logo. So it does have a bit of the cobra up on the top. And then the letters themselves are sort of angular and sharp. The edge of the S and the end of the R become fangs, and the T is a forked tongue. So as a piece of design from far away, I think it's a little hard to read. Sort of the grumpy comic book store owner in me, when I put it last week on the new rack, and I thought, I don't know if people know what this is, but also, I'm glad it exists. But as a thing that looks like an 80s band, yes. Cover B. Cover B is drawn and colored by Juann Cabal. This is a take on that Kiss album cover, right?
Yeah.
And hopefully, as I stretch out this sentence, Mark can either pull it up on his phone and hold his phone up to the camera, or pull it up on his computer. But so it's black and white. So it's in gray tones. The 4 band members, like Dynasty, Kiss Dynasty, right? Funny story. The only Kiss album I ever owned, unplugged. So I guess I'm not a real Kiss fan. The only elements on this cover that's in color are green eyes, blue sunglasses, orange sunglasses, and purple sunglasses. And these 4 band members, it's these 4 headshots, sort of in a grid with gray backgrounds. They've not been photographed together or drawn together. Each of them looks tough, but is making a different kind of expression, right? A smirk, pouty lips, gritted teeth with a frown, gritted teeth with a slightly crazy smile. Cover C is drawn and colored by Brent Schoonover, who's done some stuff for Marvel, right? I forget. This is depicting sort of an event poster, because it's the band standing, with arms crossed, or like arms on belts, or arms cradling guitar. There are 2 snakes sort of around them, not literally, but as like a graphical framing elements. There's fire behind them. There's fire around the snakes. Around the edge, there's black and purple. So it's sort of like they're standing in hell, right? Because bands like this, it's the devil's music. And on the bottom, here the logo's just in gray, but the bottom says, "Live tonight, Minnetonka, Cobra Soda," which is a reference to Inside the Issue. And the drawing here, the rendering here, looks a little bit more like sort of interior comic book art and coloring. It's not colored pencil, but it has a little bit of a softness to it. So I think this is technically painted, but it might be markers if it's not digital. But it's meant to look like a printed poster. And cover D is another painting by Steve Beach, completely different image than cover A. And this one, I think, is meant to look like an album cover, because the image of the band and the giant looming purple cobra in the background, and the like stormy clouds in the sky and the lightning, right? And they're performing and standing on like rocks and the desert. The sort of height and width of that portion of the image is square. So I think it's supposed to look like when like Marvel has done like its quote album cover homage. It's like hip hop covers where they take a like square CD compact disc music cover and then like shrink it so that it fits in the width of a comic book, but then like the top and bottom have to be black, sort of like letterboxing. This is rendered in the same painterly style by Steve Beach as cover A. And I think it's supposed to refer a little bit to Metallica's Ride the Lightning, because the album cover for I'm sure there are many more album covers from hard rock and heavy metal bands which have lightning on them. But I'm thinking of Ride the Lightning, which specifically has an electric chair floating in space with stormy clouds around it and lightning bolts. Mm-hmm. What's fun about this cover and Steve Beach's sort of rendering is if I squint, his depictions of these characters makes me think a little bit of He-Man paintings from the 80s, because these guys have like long hair and like not armor, but sort of rock and roll clothing accoutrements, right?
Torch has got a big sort of shoulder pauldron with spikes on it and stuff, and his axe, his guitar is a literal axe.
Yes, his guitar. That guitar.
And the Ripper's axe is an axe, and the guitar is a bladed instrument as well, like a giant axe.
So this is not a He-Man reference, but it does remind me incidentally of He-Man. You know, long hair, big muscular men. This kind of 70s, 80s painted style. And then there's a cover that is all white, printed on cardstock. It's the blank sketch cover.
I read something the other day which sort of was a light bulb moment for me, which is that sort of like a guide price as to how much you might expect to pay for a variant cover. So 1 in 10 you might expect to pay $10. 1 in 25 you might expect to pay $25. Approximate rule of thumb, which helps kind of give you a bit of an idea, maybe. A retailer exclusive covers here is we have Dynamic Forces NYCC 2025 Sukesha Ray variant, which is a slightly mangery version of Zartan in his Cold Slither costume, sort of sat cross-legged with some Cold Slither lyrics in the background. Yeah, I'll let viewers draw their own conclusions as to what I might make of the quality of this particular cover.
I'll chime in. I don't think this is the strongest of these covers in terms of drawing skill.
And then there is also in the interior of the book, it always lists out, you know, who the cover artists are, and listed there is Marcelo Vasco. And we've not seen that cover yet, but I believe that he did a lot of the RPM Records related art. So I imagine that the cover might look a little bit like something like that, if not that exact image. I believe he also did the album cover. So I imagine when we see it, it might look like that. Possibly the exclusive might be available at NYC, tying in with that live concert, or who knows, it might even be an exclusive book handed out by Skybound at their panel. You never know. They always hand out something interesting at their Energon Universe panel, so it could well be that one. So, should we get on to a plot breakdown and talk about what actually happened in this book? So spoilers ahead if you've not read it, and a spoiler reverse. This is the time to beware. Okay, here we go. Plot breakdown.
Plot breakdown.
Back in the day, G.I. Joe thwarted Cobra's attempt to brainwash the public with subliminal messages hidden in the Cold Slither song. However, the music video that was shared online and has been discovered by new fans, brainwashing them to Cobra's side and ushering in Cobra as rulers. Now, 20 Questions host Hector Ramirez is asking the question, whatever happened to Cold Slither, as he tracks down the Dreadnok band members? Ripper, who is happily married in suburbia, Torch, playing in a wedding band, Buzzer, a sociology professor, and Zartan, running a dojo. Hector Ramirez encourages the band to reunite to play some new material, but this time it has subliminal messages from G.I. Joe encouraging an insurrection against Cobra to overthrow the rulers. That's basically it in a nutshell, Tim.
Oh, okay. All right, so I want to start by saying, in the same way that in our long contextual introduction, we were sort of celebrating and puzzling over sort of what does it mean for Hasbro to push Cold Slither in 2025? I also wonder, very specifically, what does it mean for Skybound to publish this Cold Slither comic in 2025? So I have a note here that says continuity, a one-off for Skybound, like the Arashikage showdown from Devil's Due, or future noir from IDW. I'm not talking about something like the Paul Allor World on Fire series, which ran for 10 issues and is a full story arc, right, in a sizable graphic novel. I find it's fun and cute and maybe a little puzzling that this is where Skybound starts when it does its first out of continuity one-off G.I. Joe comic or miniseries. If you'd asked me 2 years ago, I would have said, oh, they'll totally continue with Saturday Morning Adventures. They'll give it a different name because that name belongs to IDW, right? If they're smart, they'll grab the same writer and artist and colorist, or at least artist. And if they didn't, I'm sure they would pick great people. But Skybound has not been interested in, continuing a lot of things from previous G.I. Joe publishers, besides a Larry Hama monthly G.I. Joe. And, in these other publishers tried some sort of one-off continuity experiments. And if those had been popular, they would have done more. And it was a way to, flex some different muscles or grab a slightly different audience, like that future noir. Mark, was it 2 issues and then it was collected as a little book? Okay. Mm-hmm. That's not really G.I. Joe, but it's also definitely G.I. Joe. And in a different way, this is not G.I. Joe, but it's also definitely G.I. Joe. And what's even stranger is that this isn't just like, oh, well, like this is a world where Cold Slither was a real band. There's this meta commentary. There's this added layer because it's taking that episode as if it happened. So we're in the animated continuity, but it's set in 2025, right? But the characters haven't aged 40 years. So we're sort of not in the animated continuity.
And to your point earlier as well, in the cartoon, the band didn't actually write or play the music or maybe not even sing the songs themselves. So it's almost sort of remembering the cartoon how we might have remembered it rather than what actually happened in the cartoon, because they weren't a real band. They just did these two, one recording where they mimed along and then a live gig that again didn't I don't think even last a single song. So they didn't, the Dreadnoks didn't have an exhaustive music career in
and in this comic book you get the sense that they had more of a career and that they really could play these instruments. I do believe that Zartan would really be able to sing. And I'm just going to jump ahead to pages 4 and 5 because the other note that I wrote, which is sort of my main thematic topic, right? It's the double page spread where the top panel is Cobra coming into town with a red sky. And then the bottom tier has a panel of Hector Ramirez, and his panel stretches across the fold. And he says, "But what of the Dreadnoks? Wasn't it their beloved anthem that ushered in a new age of American hegemony?" Tonight, we'll chronicle how fame, fortune, and the pressure to record even just one more song drove apart the most influential group in music history, and ask what it would take to bring this band of vipers back. And then I realized, oh, this is an issue of What If, and Hector Ramirez is the Watcher. And then I thought about issues of not the cartoon, not the show. I thought about issues of What If, and what happens is the Watcher introduces himself and spends a page or 2 or 3 telling you what happened in the original story, and then says, but what if this one thing was different? And then the rest of the story plays out. And so when I flip back to pages 2 and 3, that summarizes the episode, the actual animated series episode, except it slightly updates it to now because in the third panel, this is on page 2, Destro has ribbing on his shoulder, which tells me okay, that's a modern version of the costume. That's the classified Destro. Interestingly, sorry, did I say panel 2 or panel 3? Panel 3. Interestingly, panel 2 sort of reminds me of how he might have dressed in the Devil's Due run. But I'm definitely thinking Devil's Due here because Tim Seeley is involved, the artwork. And so then it becomes an even more fun and strange experiment because for all of the comics for Skybound to do, for the first time, that's not the Energon universe, and that's not the Larry Hama, A Real American Hero verse. It's not like a sort of continuity that could be either of them. It's not like a sequel to something that's beloved. Like, let's get Tom Scioli back and do one more issue of his crazy Transformers crossover. Let's get Rob Liefeld back to do like a 6-page story with Snake Eyes from Dead Game. Like, no, we're going to do that episode, but not that episode. And it's now, but it's not now. It's then, but it's also, but the Watcher's here and it's the multiverse without saying those words. And so in that regard, you can hand this to anyone. And I think about G.I. Joe comics, which ones I could hand to anyone, and they'd say, I like this comic. This is a good story. And maybe even, I think I like G.I. Joe. I'd like to read more. And you can do this with Cold Slither. And then by the end of the episode, we'll answer, would I?
And yeah, indeed. Would someone read this and think, I want to read more of G.I. Joe like this? Because I'll tell you something, there's basically no other G.I. Joe like this. and sort of to that point of uncanniness of it being a little bit just different to everything else. It's interesting that on this particular page, which I think is page 2 of the book, you kind of get a glimpse of Cobra Commander, and you are led to believe that this is the hooded Cobra Commander, who has not been present in G.I. Joe media for a number of years, with a bit of a sort of a quiet blacklisting of that particular design. So you don't get to see the whole hood in this comic. You get a hint of it in that panel 4 with the briefcase, and then another hint where you just see a close up of his eyes, which suggests that he is wearing the cowl.
Yes.
And to
movie producer, of the live action movies 10, 15 years ago said, it looks like the KKK, right? And everyone's like, what? No. And he's like, And then Hasbro got cold feet, and now doesn't want this terrorist bad guy in a blue hood. Doesn't want that design depicted.
That association.
Yeah. So that association, right? Thank you.
And funny enough, when we see Cobra Commander on the right-hand side of that double page spread, the Cobra Commander that they are using there is what I think is known as the Regal Cobra Commander. So the basically the first Cobra Commander that was released as part of the Classified series, which was basically the first series of releases for Classified when that first started out, which was where they were sort of trying to push the design in slightly different and updated directions before they've sort of come a little bit closer now to just trying to update the original designs and not deviate quite as much. But yeah, you can see from the sort of the ribbing in the costume, the sort of gold chain on the front. That's definitely the design that is being referenced for that particular look of Cobra Commander in this alternate now, and it makes a difference for the comic because this version of Cobra Commander has never been used in a comic. So while it's a recognized design, it's a different Cobra Commander to what we've seen in every other comics continuity.
Can you go back to the previous slide, Mark, where you had see the Crimson Guardsman who's blue? Are you showing us from a preview or from your like official digital version? Because
this was the preview that was released by Skybound, and they obviously got a little bit of feedback that Crimson Guards are called Crimson Guards because they are crimson, and they're not called Blue Guards because they are.
So this did get corrected in the final printed comic.
In between the preview that was shared relatively early and the printed copy. Yeah.
Okay, so the story here, besides the framing of, I said this is a what if story. It's also the other reference. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm jumping over what you're going to say.
You finish the sentence. The other reference is
VH1 Behind the Music type documentary.
Okay, so I actually only ever watched 4 episodes of Behind the Music, and I got the sense that it was mostly, each episode was an hour, right? And I think the Guns N' Roses episode was 2 hours, and it would spend most of the time with what had happened. And then there'd be a little bit of footage of the band members or the surviving band members now. And sometimes that was like to go in and out of commercial, but they weren't trying to get them back together. It really was this sort of documentary. And so here, where he's trying to get them back together, this now reminds me of The Toys That Made Us, the Netflix series. There's the episode about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird created the Turtles in '83. And when this episode was filmed 5 years ago, hadn't talked or collaborated much in a couple years. And they did a joint interview, or there's footage of them being in the same room together for the first time. And they had a nice time doing that episode or doing that interview or doing that B-roll footage. I think there had been some tension, and they sort of made some amends. And sort of going forward, maybe they'd be friends again or friendly again. And then what happens 2 years later, is IDW announces Ninja Turtles: The Last Ronin, which is this rewritten and expanded 5-issue miniseries from an old plot by Eastman and Laird from the 80s. And so there's a little bit of a parallel here where Hector Ramirez has this ulterior motive, or this mission, this goal to not just check in on the band and sort of casually say, well, would you play together again, but to get them together again. And Mark, I wanted to ask you about sort of where this story goes, because Hector Ramirez in the G.I. Joe cartoon is just a reporter. He's not, when he tags along with some Joes to go to a Cobra headquarters, he's not staging footage so that the Joes look foolish. So how do you feel about this sort of active version of Hector Ramirez?
Well, and I guess to a degree, the plot twist is that it's not really Hector Ramirez at the end. It's a Joe in a costume who've been concocting a scheme to reunite the Dreadnoks, have them put out a new single, and brainwash the populace back. But in terms of his career, it's 40 years on. It's not 40 years. It's somewhere between 0 years and 40 years. And obviously the world is a different place, and his career has probably moved on, and he's maybe the type of thing that he does is different. But looking at this page as well, and your analogy to the Watcher is quite interesting, because he says here, in my career, I've been everywhere, talked to everyone, from rock stars to robotic man trucks to subterranean lava gods. You could say that I've asked a lot more than 20 questions. And to some degree, he is like the cinematic universe. The alternative universe glue here, sort of straddling worlds of Gem, Inhumanoids, G.I. Joe, and Transformers as being the one constant between those worlds, and being able to see in between them, much like the Watcher, perhaps viewing different universes.
So we should go back a half step here and give some credits. Hector Ramirez first shows up in an episode of G.I. Joe called 20 Questions, which, fact check me while I say this sentence, Mark, is written by Buzz Dixon. He shows up in one or two more episodes. He was supposed to show up in the animated movie, and did not, but you do see that character name in the end credits, and he does make the script, although those scenes were, I've seen them in the script. I have not seen them in the storyboard, so I think they were cut early, but they were recorded I believe they were recorded if he gets the character and the voice actor, Neil Ross, get credit at the end of the animated movie. I don't remember what episode of Transformers that is, although since it's got Grapple and Beachcomber, it could only be 4 or 5 episodes. He's in an episode of Gem called One Gem Too Many, and he's in an episode of Inhumanoids called Cult of Darkness. And the people writing and story editing and producing these Sunbow cartoons were all sharing space and crossing paths in Los Angeles. And so, this was not this was a fun little. I think it's a half. I think it's a tiny bit more than an Easter egg, but in the same way that Cobra Commander sort of shows up in a season 3 episode of Transformers. So they're not the same continuity, but they share some elements. Okay, so Mark, after you put on this slide, what else did you want to say about
I was just looking at the TF Wiki, and possibly the episode might be Prime Target, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
Back to you.
I'm not sure.
But yeah, he's described by my quick Google as Buzz Dixon's parody of the infamous Geraldo Rivera. So I think it is. I think part of the connectivity is writer Buzz Dixon sort of carrying across this character between different creations that he's involved with.
But yes, I don't think he wrote all these episodes though. I think Flint Dille wrote one of them. I think people who were like in the office. And Buzz Dixon did say to me many years ago that he specifically is Geraldo Rivera. That he wanted to take Rivera down a peg. Okay, so the other thing that's happening on that first page, where you have that sort of Watcher multiverse panel that Mark's just put back on screen, I feel like writer Tim Seeley, who does refer to Black Horizon in his letter at the end, I feel like in the way that so Tim Seeley writes this G.I. Joe Transformers crossover at the end of the Devil's Due, 7-year run of G.I. Joe comics. And it involves a little bit of Cobra Law and Adventure Team and Transformers the movie stuff.
And those weird G.I. Joe space alien characters like Lobotomax and
yes from the Lunar Tricks
yeah,
Empire,
and even the Battle Beasts get chucked in there in the background,
right? And so Tim Seeley is not, with this Gem and Inhumanoids and Optimus Prime reference, he's not saying, hey, I wrote Transformers once, but it does sort of remind me that he has previously gotten to mix these brands together in a fun and inventive way. Okay, so while we're on page 1, I love panel 2, where Hector Ramirez is standing in this studio, and there are 2 giant like TV screens behind him with his show logo and his like publicity image, where I don't know how to describe this other than the Michael Jackson Thriller album pose, not the music video, the way that he's like lying down but propping himself up on his elbow, and then his other arm is on his knee and he's looking at you with his eyebrow cocked. I love it. Right. Although, if you open the Michael Jackson Thriller album, there's a second photo where he's in the same pose, but he's holding like a baby leopard. Okay. So I noted when I read this that on pages 2 and 3, yeah, look at that. Mark's got it on his phone. Always ready to talk about Michael Jackson Thriller. That's when we retire Talking Joe. I'll just do a podcast. Okay. I noted on pages 2 and 3 that in the summary of the original episode, on page 2, right, Destro with his then girlfriend Anastasia de Cobre had already programmed an AI chatbot to generate a catchy song, but they needed a face for the music video. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. The original episode doesn't call it artificial intelligence. I think it's like computer synthesis. It's a term that means the same thing, but that doesn't have the modern flair or sinister flavor if you have feelings about artificial intelligence. And I thought when I read this, this doesn't mention the subliminal messages. So whereas in the episode, that is immediate, right? We're going to have this fake song. We're going to put subliminal messages. We're going to brainwash people. That's the plan. And I thought for a second, did Tim Seeley forget? And then I thought, it's probably going to be part of the plot. And so it is. And Seeley gets to make this very modern and maybe have a little bit of commentary on, modern day like Yelp culture, computer user comment culture, because you have this kid who's watching the video on, let's say, YouTube, and and he says, "Ha, lame, lols," and then the kid starts to get brainwashed, right?
Yep.
It still doesn't say subliminal messages, right? It on page 3 in those final 2 panels. So the kid's getting brainwashed. So I sort of wondered, for someone who reads this comic who has never seen the episode or who completely forgets it, does the sort of omission of or later mention of subliminal messages make this story stronger? Does it not change it? Does it sort of then like have less to do with the original episode?
You know, I was getting distracted now, flicking forward a couple of pages. Isn't that Baroness design cool? With the lapels of her suit sort of making the Cobra sign.
Yeah, and Tomax and Zaymot get to be in their double-breasted suits that have a little flourish that refers back to their acrobat Cobra costumes. Let's talk about the art.
Yeah.
So Juann Cabal has been drawing a bunch of stuff for Marvel the last couple years. He's done some Cosmic Ghost Rider and some Daredevil and some Miles Morales Spider-Man and some Guardians of the Galaxy. And there was that Timeless special or miniseries, which is like Luke Cage in the future. And he was one of Marvel's Stormbreakers, which is that sort of honorary name that Marvel gives to like 8 artists every year, and they're going to promote them all year and give them exciting variant covers to do. And I think if you're a Stormbreaker, I think that means you get a contract and health insurance, but they don't talk about it like that anymore. But when Marvel started this program like 15 years ago and they called it Young Guns, I think that was actually the best part of it. Okay, so Juann Cabal's art here is very tight and crisp, and it reminds me, Mark, of the work of Jamie McKelvey.
Yeah.
Who drew Young Avengers and The Wicked and the Divine, and who co-owns The Wicked and the Divine, and who's done covers for Marvel and did that Batman One Bad Day Catwoman special that was also printed as a little hardcover a couple years ago, and I think just did something for Distillery. And I wanted to get your take, Mark, on not just describing the art, but what do you think of the art in this issue? Yeah,
the Jamie McKelvey comparison is a good one. I was also thinking a little bit of Chris Evenhouse, who did G.I. Joe World on Fire, and I think what we're describing there is quite sort of fine line work, which is left very open, not overdoing the lines, the shading, not too many spotted blacks apart from on black outfits, and sort of leaving it quite an open style for the colorist to do a little bit more, and I think leave that as a bit of a parallel for us to make too. It's kind of a cartoony style, almost like an animated style. So like that sort of cell shading and stuff. So I think what we're seeing is like a bit of a middle ground between the look of an animation and modern comics.
Yeah.
So it's sort of quite sympathetic, really, to I guess the intent of the book, really, that it's meant to be a sort of a comic continuation of a what if world set in this cartoon Slither parallel universe.
Yeah, well said. I appreciate how well Cabal draws everything. Everyone looks good. I sort of expected. I wasn't familiar with his work when I started reading the comic, even though he's done a bunch of stuff for Marvel recently. It sort of all happens to be Marvel stuff that I haven't read. But as I was reading this, I thought, all these expressions, all this body language, all of these sort of backgrounds and scenes, they are crisp and accurate and lovely, and nothing is like a weak point. It's not like, oh, he draws characters and backgrounds well, but like, oh, the G.I. Joe vehicles, like, oh, that ice snake, or oh, that moray, he sure missed that. Everything looks good. The hiss tanks on pages 2 and 3 look good. All of that said, I do find the art, it's great, it's handsome, everything looks good. I find it I'd like a little more oomph. And I have often loved artists whose work is this tight and careful. I'm thinking of Chris Sprouse, right? I don't think the penciling here is like Chris Sprouse, but I do think the inking is like how like Carl Story inks Chris Sprouse, right? Chris Sprouse did a bunch of Tom Strong, and long ago did broke into comics with like some Legion spinoffs for DC, like Legion of Superheroes spinoffs. So, I've sort of gotten used to, in the Energon universe at Skybound, the two artists who've drawn the most G.I. Joe stories so far, their stuff is open like this, but there's a little more zip to the inking and sort of clothing folds and speed lines and punches. There's a little more gesture, and certainly the two main artists who've been drawing the Larry Hama book, there is a little bit or a lot more of sort of gesture and like not like ink splatter, but sort of oomph. And I think you make a good point that this is meant to look a lot like the cartoon. And where I feel like it doesn't quite make it is in the colors. So Rex Lokus does a nice job here. Light sources all make sense. Nothing is ugly. I do find the colors a little pasty. These 2 pages, what is it? 4, 5, 6, 7. Pages 6 and 7, when we cut to Minnetonka Cobra Soda, and it's snowed outside, and Ripper is in his blue bathrobe. I think these 2 pages are perfectly fine, but like, the interior, this like breakfast table scene, this is pasty beige, pasty olive, pasty gray, pasty blue, pasty brown hair. Like if I'm comparing this to the IDW Saturday Morning Adventures miniseries, where the colors like really look like the cartoon, and it doesn't have to be cell shading. I think I just want more saturation in these colors and fewer muted colors.
Yeah, I mean, the sort of the look of the likes of Jamie McKelvey, sort of, and this book, it's sort of it's a stylistic, it's very clean, but also sort of in terms of the content of what we're seeing as well, that a lot of what we've got are people posing and looking cool or standing around and talking. So we've got Hector Ramirez doing a standing introduction, exposition. We've got recap of previous events covering the first few pages. We've got Cobra posing triumphantly. Then we've got a number of sequences where Hector Ramirez is going and seeing each one of the Dreadnoks to check in with them, and it's 2 pages each times 4 of them standing around and talking, essentially, with a little bit of extra visual flair of Torch smashing someone with his keytar or whatever, but it not sort of big kinetic military action or anything like that. You've got a sort of a concert scene, a double page splash, and then we've got more sort of essentially groups of people talking. We've got Joe's running towards us in an exciting way, and a little bit of the hint of insurrection, but it's not a typical military action adventure, is it? It's different to that.
And if you're thinking, if this is just a comic where some musicians play music and some people stand around and talk, how could you expect this to have art with more, pep or zip? And I would say, well, if you pick up any Marvel Conan comic drawn by John Buscema, there's probably a scene at the beginning where like Conan walks into town and walks past some like a marketplace or some villagers, or goes into a bar, and there's no fight yet, and there's no like dragon, and no one's casting a spell, and it's just like we're walking and talking, and just the sort of wrought poses and musculature and cheekbones and chins. even these scenes where people are not engaged in action, I would like to see less crisp, careful drawing. And then this sort of funny thing happens on page 11. This is when Ramirez visits Buzzer at this university. And I thought this scene was great because I always forget that Buzzer has that bit in his file card written by Larry Hama back in the 80s that he's got all this education and he gave it up to be a Dreadnok. But this funny thing happens on page 11 where Buzzer pulls out his like pointer, not a like a laser pointer, an actual like pointer, like a little collapsing like antenna metal pointer thing. And he sort of slashes it in the air, I think just for a dramatic effect. I don't think to attack Ramirez, but Ramirez like jumps 6 feet in the air and spreads his arms and legs and
does the splits
midair and evades the sort of attack or the feint. And that's a really nicely drawn pose. And that's a really nice, like 2-panel bit of choreography. But I don't understand why Ramirez does that. Like, did I miss something in his beginning narration where he's like, I'm an incredible reporter and I do CrossFit and I'm an Olympic gymnast, right? Like, isn't he like, what am I missing, Mark?
So I guess that, I mean, it's a bit of it's an odd scene in terms of the attack, the response, the fact that he jumps up 6 foot high in the sky and does the splits, and it's not something you'd expect from a reporter. But I guess that part of that is that's not really Hector Ramirez. That is Lady J in disguise. And there's a couple of points during the story which sort of stick out and go, huh, that's weird. You wouldn't expect a reporter to do that. So, the reporter doing that with the splits, it is out of place. And then later on in the middle page where the staples are, you've got a sort of a little panel there of Ramirez's head glitching. You're like, what's going on there? If you're paying attention to the panel, it's like something weird has happened there, and that's either an artistic mistake or it's going to have some sort of payoff later on in the story. So that's a hint for us that there's hologram work at play with Ramirez. So the reveal that comes later on in the book doesn't necessarily come out of nowhere, that there's a little bit of preparation being laid for people who are paying attention.
I was not paying attention. I when I got to the what page is this? When I got to page 19, and there's a hiss tank on fire, and Ramirez and 3 Joes are walking toward us, but Ramirez has this sort of hologram glitch. And then there's a panel of like Lady J with lots of hologram glitches around her, like she's in the Matrix. And then now Lady J standing in front of the other 3 Joes. I will admit I was not reading this carefully, and I sort of didn't see that change. And then when I got to the final page and Ramirez is fist bumping Ramirez, I thought, what is going on? I'm gonna distract you all from how careless I was in reading this by pointing out a couple fun things. That hey, there's some night creepers on that same page. So I bet Seeley put that in the script because Seeley knows his G.I. Joe.
And here's a bit of an Easter egg. I wonder if you picked up on this one.
I spy with my little eye.
Now, when Hector Ramirez went to go and visit Zartan at his dojo, which was called, this is very small for me, Mr. Z's Dojo Palooza.
Yeah.
Did you spot on the roof of the Dojo Palooza and the adjoining building were 2 night creepers spying over the top?
I did not. That's great.
So I guess that's sort of extra Cobra security, keeping an eye on what Zartan is doing. So it sort of it makes those night creepers appearing later on in in the book and being attacked by members of Zartan's dojo make a little more sense.
Yeah.
Previous panel, though, I think those are meant to be alley vipers.
Oh.
Those are sort of coloured. Those are coloured in kind of viper blue, so they look like alley vipers, but they're in the sort of the viper blue colours with sort of a navy blue and then sort of red accents on the top. But
wasn't there some recolored version of the alley, like
there were some recolored versions,
like a Toys R Us exclusive where they're blue with red bits?
Yeah, there's enough recolored versions that I'm not going to call that an error and it's also in an alternate future as well, so they can do whatever they want with their redesigns. That's fine. I just wonder whether the colors were in line with the intent,
right?
But it's fine.
Okay, so speaking of Easter eggs, we see Snake Eyes for one panel in this whole comic book, and that is on page 21, which is the big Yo Joe partial double page splash, and he has black hair.
Yes,
and I don't know if we can call that a coloring mistake because we never saw his hair in the animated series. So who's to say?
Yeah.
But so Mark, let's talk about the actual plot, because the plot of this comic is that Hector Ramirez gets the band together, but it turns out that that's Lady J and some Joes getting the band together and then defeating the band, defeating Cobra.
Defeating Cobra.
Okay,
so somehow as part of that process of the Dreadnoks recording new material and then broadcasting that out to the world, that somehow the Joes, with Hector Ramirez, have been able to put in some counter programming so that it's blocking or undoing the subliminal messages of the original Cold Slither messaging, and so those people who were previously kind of brainwashed and loyal to Cobra because of that brainwashing are now sort of waking up and rebelling and setting fire to his tanks.
So Cobra Commander can no longer be president. I do like this sort of White House Capitol building that's also a terrordrome on page 22. I love the body language of that one Crimson Guardsman, also on page 22, who's watching on TV, but it's watching on TV with a bowl of snacks in front of him, lying on his stomach with one leg up, with his hands propping up his face. I think many of us watched TV that way when we were little kids. I cannot watch TV now lying on my stomach looking up at the TV.
And that on that panel there that I was talking about, the sort of the payoff, they kind of do a bit of that exposition and explaining, and sort of they cover that point that you wondered whether it was missing in the original setup. So Hector Ramirez, aka Lady J, says, a question: how exactly did Cobra pull it off back then? Subliminal messages inside a highly watched Cold Slither video, augmented by streaming algorithms. Another question: does that work in the other direction too? Well, let's see. G.I. Joe.
Okay, so Mark, does this work? Does this plot work? That there's these two stories, that it's not, that Hector Ramirez isn't doing all the work, that he's working with the Joes, that there's a Joe in disguise, that they've got these reverse subliminal messages, and then in the span of 4 pages, like Cobra is defeated and America is liberated. I know my question sounds leading, like I want you to say no, but I actually just want to get your take on this. Like, does the story work for you? Not as a G.I. Joe story. Does the story work for you? I
think it works. I mean, it feels, light, but I think a one and done, standalone, one issue, one shot. that needs to stand on its own is potentially always going to be a little bit light, because you don't get the stakes that are built up over time, or with a continuing story. So they're trying to do quite a lot in a relatively short amount of space. And I think that's always quite tricky to pull it off, to have something that really stands on its own, but also has a lot of heft behind it. They're sort of doing a recap of the cartoon. They're doing that behind the music's comedy bit, checking in with the Dreadnoks where they are. They're building up a dystopian future where Cobra has essentially won. They're then having a G.I. Joe plot to undo that and set up a rebellion and essentially try and reverse the Cobra victory, all in the space of a single issue, 20 or so pages. So there's a lot to do in a short amount of space, and they kind of accomplished that. Would it be my favorite G.I. Joe story of all time? Probably not. But would I say that it was bad, or that I was especially disappointed? I wouldn't say that either.
I want to give Skybound credit. This is a 24-page story, and it's only $3.99. And comic books nowadays are 20 pages. So we got 4 extra pages of comics here. They didn't raise the price by $1. And then there's that letter. There's that sort of letters page letter from writer Tim Seeley, who talks about what the theme of the story is for him. I like the story more after I read his letter. I like what he had to say. I think it's nice that he reminded us that he had written a little bit of G.I. Joe before, in addition to drawing a bunch. I think about a unit of story for comics and a unit of story for cartoons. And for comics, it's one issue, and for cartoons, it's one episode. And they don't, they're not analogous. I think about when DC and Marvel have published movie adaptations, and it's like a 48-page special or maybe a 64-page special, and like all the scenes happen, but there's not a lot of breathing room. Like big moments may have to sort of get the same amount of like space on a page as medium moments. I'm thinking of like the Star Trek 6 movie adaptation that DC did in, 1992, 1? Or like the Batman movie adaptation from 1990. But also the sort of closest comparison is the 4-issue G.I. Joe Saturday Morning Adventures miniseries, which was kind of meant to be a 5-part miniseries. It sort of wants to be 5 issues, but like 20 pages does not equal 20 minutes or 22 minutes. But I also don't think that, this comic's not going to sell if it's like double sized and like $7. So I do think this amount of real estate works, and as a one-off it works. I don't know that people wanted a miniseries. I was a little disappointed when I read it because I think it is trying to be a lot of things, and I sort of have 2 metrics here. Does it do well trying to do the many things that it wants to do? And also, does it do what I want it to do? And I think what I wanted was just another episode. And that's not what it wanted to do. And also, you can't do another episode. Because again, like how would the timing work? It's like, well, why would the band get back together? Like Cobra was defeated. Like that was never going to be a 2-parter. So I found this to be a fun and unusual, and it's okay. My review is it's okay. I thought it was okay, and it sort of like hit me as like, okay, there's some moments that I liked. There's some moments that I thought were like only okay, and because I was not reading it carefully, I'm sorry. There were moments that I didn't get. I did want to point this out, which we haven't said yet here, but Zartan on this panel, when he sort of reveals himself, he takes off his hoodie and he's like, "No, it's me. I'm back." Cabal has drawn Kirby Crackle around him, which I think is meant to look like the hologram change for how his power works in the Larry Hama comics, which is not, how the technology or the skill works in the cartoon. So there's another sort of reference across the media. So I read it and I thought, well, that was okay. I'm not. Sometimes you and I ask of these like unusual G.I. Joe stories, written and drawn out of continuity or by unusual picks, sometimes we ask, who is this for? And I think this is definitely for you and me, who like watched the episode then or are longer time G.I. Joe fans and have seen the episode since, and who appreciate this kind of sort of sequel, remake, mashup. I will say I was disappointed when it was announced that Skybound didn't ask Michael Charles Hill to write it. That's unreasonable of me. He has not written comics that have been published, although he did work for Mirage, the Ninja Turtles publisher, for a couple of years. So I think he certainly knows comics. But he's a TV writer. I sort of thought that like since it was his, it would be cool if Skybound asked him. But if you're going to do a one shot, maybe you go with a known quantity like Tim Seeley, who knows G.I. Joe, who's written comics, who's written some really good and really popular comics. For all I know, they did ask Hill, and Hill said, I can't do it for that little, or I can't do it in that little time. My guess is they did not ask him. But he's sort of on my mind because in the last 2 years, he's done a bunch of G.I. Joe and Transformers conventions, and he has talked about this. And it seems like Skybound, in the case of this other G.I. Joe thing that goes back 40 years, a comic called A Real American Hero, is very good about getting that writer back. And it's not the same, but that'd be cool. I will, just as a counter, while I was feeling a little grumpy about this comic, like, well, this is okay. A comic book store owner who I know a bit on Facebook messaged me with his 2-sentence review, and I thought this was a nice balance. So he goes by Lord Retail, and he owns Acme Comics in Greensboro, North Carolina. And he said, Cold Slither was as perfect of a comic. He's a big G.I. Joe fan. Cold Slither was as perfect of a comic as I could have hoped for. And I was in the, why is this happening? Nobody wants this camp. But from page one, I knew it would be awesome. Hope you do a whole episode unpacking it, smiley face. And I was like, yes, we will. And I didn't have the heart to tell him. I thought it was only okay. But maybe if he watches this episode, he'll know. But, as you and I have established, even if I don't love a G.I. Joe comic, I certainly like talking about it. And I thought it's a good ending in terms of like the craft of writing, whether or not the hologram disguise stuff quite works for me. I think having the band get back together is a really fun story bit, and it's the right note to end on. Like, I don't want them to go to jail. I don't want like all of their albums, the old ones or the new ones, to get like thrown in a dumpster or like burned. It's like, no, we're rooting for the bad guys here, or we're sort of rooting for these underdogs because they've fallen on hard times, which is that behind the music trope. It's like, well, things were never the same after the band peaked in the 80s. And what Seeley is doing by writing this very specific ending is, I think it's unlikely, but he's allowing the possibility that there would be more of these.
Yeah, I mean, leaving the door open for sure. Cool. I think we're done with pretty much with this.
Should we talk about the back cover for a few minutes?
The back cover, which obviously brings Tim a lot of delight, seeing a back cover tying in so neatly into the contents of the comic.
Yes, more recent listeners may not know that I was grumpy at IDW, and actually Skybound has continued doing it, but the back covers of Real American Hero, I'm not talking about the Edward John universe, the back covers of Real American Hero for the last like 10 years have been nothing but the G.I. Joe logo, and I guess it's better than nothing at all. Like, I don't need an ad, but like, do the cover in black and white, or do like one panel from that issue, or do an ad for next month's. Anyway, so here is not just the Cold Slither logo on black. Actually, when I saw this out of the corner of my eye, I thought it was an ad for like a Super Nintendo game, because comics in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s would have a big like painting or photo on the top half, and then a big logo, and then very small like screen caps, because the resolution of video games and TVs was not good enough that you could like show the graphics. And this sort of looks like a PlayStation 1 ad from 2002. Anyway, But it introduces the actual members of the band, and it says there's a paragraph of a copy. It says Cold Slither returns with a ferocious new album, marking a brutal evolution for Cobra's infamous band, led by Zartan and the Dreadnoks. Their sound blends heavy metal chaos with anarchic power. Once a mind-control tool for Cobra Commander, the band now delivers original tracks for the first time since the 80s. Raw, loud, and unrelenting. This isn't nostalgia. It's a sonic takeover. Cold Slither is back, and they're not here to play nice. And then there's a QR code and a little picture of 2 shirts and 2 vinyl albums. I think one's orange and one's red, and it's CD. So I guess I'm going to buy that CD.
Very good.
Oh, and it says out now.
Out now. And yeah, looking ahead to New York Comic Con, we don't just have Cold Slither representing in terms of their live gig. Imagine a lot of that will go up on the YouTubes, as happened for the San Diego gig. There is also to look out for the 3rd annual Energon Universe Group signing at Midtown Comics. Joshua Williamson, Jorge Corona, Tom Riley, Ben Abernathy, Andre Bressan, Andrea Milana, and Connor Hughes signing at Midtown Comics on Friday, October the 10th. And the next day, Saturday, October the 11th, will be Transformers and G.I. Joe, a new era for the Energon Universe panel. So might expect to see some news coming out of that. And yes, they also tease a special surprise giveaway for fans. Off previous occasions, they've given away interesting looking exclusive Ashcan editions, that kind of thing. So yeah, if you're at NYCC, definitely worth going.
One last little bit about New York Comic Con in a couple days in October of 2025. On his Facebook page, not his personal one, his professional one or his fan one, Larry Hama, who's written a lot of G.I. Joe comics, didn't say anything about G.I. Joe, but he did say that he was hoping to be at New York Comic Con, and then he said he would be, but he was specific. He said, I will try to be at the Boom Studios panel on Saturday at 12:30 in the afternoon. So some kind of announcement. But Larry Hama has not ever written anything that Boom has published. So this is not G.I. Joe, because that would be Skybound. This seems to be something else.
Cool. Keep eyes out for that. Coming up in the shops and on Talking Joe soon will be G.I. Joe issue number 12. That is released on October the 15th. This is the shooter issue from a different artist to the one that we have seen so far. This is Marco Fodera, another Italian artist. Looking forward to seeing his stuff. And then we've also got this coming week, G.I. Joe Real American Hero, issue 321 from Hama and Mooneyham. It's a new silent issue. So exciting times. Obviously, Chris Mooneyham, always excited to see his art. And this is an interesting sort of touted as a sequel to issue 21, 300 issues on. 321, of course, but also a sequel to Origins, G.I. Joe Origins from IDW issue 19, which we have covered here on the channel. And it's the first cover from Steve Beach on the Gears of Joe variants, featuring a character with a vehicle. And in that nice painted art that we've seen on the front of this very issue. So I think that is covering pretty much everything that we were going to talk about. If you are new to Talking Joe, you can find us in the usual places. talkingjoe.co.uk is the link that points you to the places we can be found. including our Patreon channel, patreon.com/talkingjoe. A big thanks to Richard, Sam, Bill, Rob, Shane, Simon, Chris, Joe, Craig, Frank, Mike, D, Shane V2. This one has got really loud yellow trousers and an orange wig. Infinite Entertainment, Patrick, Gary V, and Coldroff, who are supporting the Patreon and keeping the lights turned on with contributions towards paying all of these exorbitant hosting fees that are incurred running the channel. Thanks to all of them. Tim, where can you be found when you are not talking to me about G.I. Joe comics?
YouTube at Atomic Abe. Hub Comics is my comic book store, and my blog is a realamericanbook.com.
I have pointed a couple of people this very week in the direction of Hub Comics who were looking for some of the Harmer sketch variant covers from IDW.
We have some.
You've got a nice selection of those, haven't you?
We have some.
Yep. Reach out to Hub Comics if you've got some gaps in your G.I. Joe collection, and particularly the IDW era collection. So I think with that all said and done, we are ready to vamoose. Audience, if you are listening or watching live, you can jump off and watch the full force, who are probably about to kick off just a couple of minutes' time with their weekly roundup. There being Chris, but in the plural. But before we go, Tim, is there anything that you would like to remind us of?
Yes, I'd like to remind us all that nobody beats Talking Joe, an international... Oh, wait, I did the wrong one. Yeah, an international podcast!
Laters.